The subject line hit like a punch. Let's be adults about this. No warning, no buildup, just a cold three-line email sitting in Leo's inbox, somewhere between a weapons inventory report and a weather update. He was 4 months into deployment in Kandahar when Sabrina decided 13 years of marriage could end as a PDF attachment. The message was curt. She'd filed the divorce papers. She'd emptied their joint account. She'd moved her new boyfriend, Oliver, into their house in Seattle. That was it. That was all. Leo read the email twice. Then he closed the laptop and said nothing. That night, back in his bunk, he typed a one-word reply. Understood. No begging, no bargaining, no accusations, just the word. The kind of word that seals a chapter, not one that starts a fight. His bunkmate, Reese, glanced up from his paperback and asked if everything was okay. Leo told him it was just stuff back home. Reese nodded and went back to reading. In the military, silence carried weight. You didn't push if someone didn't open the door. And Leo wasn't the kind to throw emotions around. He never had been. But the truth was, none of it surprised him. 6 months before deployment, the shift had begun. Quiet things. Sabrina had stopped asking how his day was. She'd started coming home later from the dental clinic where she worked admin. She joined a gym, but never seemed sore. Hell, never talked about workouts. She bought new clothes. New friends started popping up and passing mentions. People Leo never met. Names that came and went like static in a call. She started guarding her phone like it was state-issued. New passwords, locked screens, distance growing between them like rust. He didn't accuse her, didn't snoop, didn't start driving by the office or checking her messages. That wasn't his way. He didn't want to be that guy. But he wasn't blind either. And when things started to feel unstable, he did what any paratrooper trained to assess risk and mitigate damage would do. He planned for failure. Nothing dramatic. No confrontations. Just small, deliberate acts. He rented a storage unit across town and quietly moved documents there. Birth certificates, their marriage license, the house deed. The VA loan was in his name only, so that part was straightforward. He stashed his grandfather's watch and his mother's old silver in a lockbox. Not because they were worth much, but because they were irreplaceable. He opened a separate account at a different bank and started funneling part of his pay there. Not enough to draw attention, but enough to start from somewhere if it came to that. The night before he left for Kandahar, she hugged him at the airport and said, "Stay safe, okay?" Her eyes were dry, her tone neutral, like someone saying goodbye to a coworker, not a husband heading into a combat zone. He should have known then. A part of him did. But hope is stubborn, even after the long silences, even after the lies that weren't quite lies but definitely weren't the truth. He still wanted to believe they'd come out of this stronger, that maybe she was scared or overwhelmed or just tired, that this was a phase. It wasn't. What she didn't know was that Leo had prepared for this moment the way soldiers prepare for a mission they hope never comes, with calm, with strategy, with an eye on the exits. He hadn't told anyone, not his friends, not his family, not even Craig, his old buddy turned lawyer, because until the email landed, it had all still felt hypothetical. Ugly, maybe. Inevitable, maybe, but not confirmed. Until it was. Leo and Sabrina had met at a backyard barbecue in Spokane in 2010, when he was home between tours and crashing at Craig's place. She was finishing up nursing school, but eventually took a front desk job at a dental office instead. Said it was less stress, more balance. 8 months later, they were married. She used to say she was proud of his service, used to call him her hero when he came back with sand in his boots and new patches on his sleeve. But she never fully understood what the job meant. Not really. Her dad was a bank manager. Her brother worked in pharmaceuticals. There were no uniforms in her family. She'd ask every now and then when he'd be done with this army thing, as if it were a phase or a part-time gig. As if 15 years and 4 deployments were something you just wrap up and walk away from like a weekend hobby. They bought their house in 2014, 3 bedrooms, small yard, quiet street. His name was the only one on the mortgage, VA loan, but he added hers to the deed because that's what husbands do. You share things, you build a life. Then came the losses. His dad collapsed from a heart attack the winter after their wedding. His mom passed 3 years later, lung cancer, the non-smoker kind. They left behind some money, Not a fortune, but enough to clear their student loans and still leave a little cushion. It gave them breathing room, stability, or at least the illusion of it. Leo deployed again. Iraq, Afghanistan. Each time, he returned a little more detached from the life he was trying to keep. Each time, Sabrina seemed a little more restless, a little more like someone auditioning for a role she didn't want anymore. At one point, she told him, "I didn't sign up to be a military wife." That was after he mentioned re-enlisting for another 4 years. He didn't fight her on it. He understood. He really did. But understanding didn't change the facts. The Army was where he felt useful, where people depended on him, where he wasn't lost in translation. In hindsight, maybe that's when it all really started unraveling. Not in Kandahar, not in the email, but the night she said those words, and he didn't argue. Because the thing about Leo was he never started fights, but he finished them. Back in Kandahar, 2 weeks after the divorce email, Leo was sitting in the mess hall when his phone buzzed with a bank alert. He glanced at it between bites of powdered eggs. Another withdrawal. This time it wasn't subtle. $88,500, practically everything they had left. He set his fork down and opened the banking app. The joint account had been drained to $22.37. Their savings, the account they'd built over years, slowly and with sacrifice, was gone. Transferred in chunks, most of them after he'd deployed. Later that night, in the dim hum of the phone center, he called the bank. He didn't have to say much. The rep walked him through the timeline. Small transfers at first, trickling out like slow leaks, then larger ones. The big withdrawals started the day after he left the country. Not a coincidence. He hung up and stood in the hallway outside, listening to laughter echo from the rooms. Guys were calling home, video chatting with their wives, kids, parents, birthdays, anniversaries, grocery lists. Normal life, dialed in from 7,000 miles away. And Leo stood in the center of it, watching his own life disintegrate in silence. Reese found him not long after. Heard from someone that Leo had looked like he'd seen a ghost at dinner. Reese wasn't the chatty type, which was why Leo trusted him. He told him everything. The empty account, the boyfriend, the emails sent while he was out on patrol. No emotion, just facts. Reese didn't respond with cliches, "No, that sucks," or "She didn't deserve you." He asked one question, "What's your plan?" Leo didn't know yet. That night, he didn't sleep much. Instead, he opened his laptop and logged into their home security system. It was an old habit, one he'd kept quiet. Sabrina probably forgot he still had access. The app showed a log of activity over the past week. He clicked through the footage. A strange truck parked in the driveway. A man he didn't recognize walking their dog. Leo's coffee mug in the guy's hand. His Seahawks sweatshirt on someone else's back. Sabrina laughing in the kitchen, his kitchen. The one he'd torn down and rebuilt with his own hands during his last leave. He closed the app and opened the notes on his phone. Made a list. First call, Craig, his Army buddy turned lawyer. Secure line only. Then check VA loan terms, review home refinance documents. Sabrina had mentioned it offhand months ago, something about pulling equity. At the time, Leo hadn't thought much of it. He added a few more items to the list. Emergency leave procedures, pension account security. He didn't feel sad. He didn't feel furious either. He felt surgical, focused. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about logistics. At 0500, before his shift started, he sent Craig an email with the subject line, "Need legal help. Discreet and urgent." By 0600, Craig had replied, "Call me." When Leo ended that call, he had a direction. He didn't need a confrontation. He didn't need to scream. He just needed to keep quiet and pay attention. Let her set the trap. Then document every step she took walking into it. Craig gave him homework. Gather any documents related to the house, the mortgage, the refinance. Keep watching the cameras. Don't let her know he was back in the picture. Don't alert her. Just watch. Wait. The background came together piece by piece. He and Sabrina had bought the house in 2014. The mortgage was in his name alone, standard VA loan procedure. But he'd added her to the deed to make her feel secure. Because that's what you do when you trust someone. That's what makes betrayal so efficient. It requires belief. The money his parents left him had helped clear their debts, her student loans, his truck. They weren't rich, but they were stable. He'd spent years building that. Each deployment helped pay for that stability. and now it had vanished in 2 weeks of wire transfers and forged forms. The camera footage kept updating. Different cars came and went. One night, Sabrina and Oliver had a group of friends over. Leo didn't recognize a single face. These were people living in his house, using his plates, drinking from his fridge. Strangers building memories in a place built on his sacrifices. He thought about sending a message, thought about replying to her email with a list of everything she was stealing. But he didn't, because none of that would stop what was already in motion. Sabrina had made her move, and what she didn't realize was that Leo had been ready for it. There were no tears to process, no what-ifs to torture himself with. His instincts, those same ones that had kept him alive overseas, were fully awake now, and they weren't interested in second chances. They were focused on recovery, on facts, on making sure she didn't get to rewrite the ending. Leo ran another check that night, comparing his pension account access settings. He set up alerts for withdrawals, updates, or changes. He changed passwords, set security questions. The bank had already frozen the joint account, but Craig advised keeping the pressure off for now. Build the case, confirm the forgery, trace the money. Everything would come in time. What mattered most now was not reacting, just planning. And when the time was right, striking. 2 months after that email detonated Leo's life, he was back on American soil. He didn't tell Sabrina he'd returned. No text, no call, no warning. He checked into a cheap motel downtown under a fake name, paid in cash, and called Craig from a burner phone. They met the next morning at a diner 10 miles outside the city. Craig looked him over and slid into the booth with a folder thick enough to end a marriage twice. Inside were the documents Leo had asked for: the deed, the loan statements, the bank activity, plus something unexpected: a refinancing application with Leo's signature. Except it wasn't his. Not really. The strokes were wrong. The middle initial was off. Whoever forged it had done a decent job, but not enough to fool someone who'd seen Leo sign 1,000 things under duress. She did this? Leo asked, already knowing. 3 months ago, Craig said, pulled out $330,000. Your signature was required since the VA loan's in your name. But this, he tapped the fake signature, this wasn't you. Leo exhaled slowly, nodding. She forged it, steal the money, clean the accounts, then file the divorce papers while I'm on patrol. She listed her boyfriend as co-applicant, Craig added. Name's Oliver Marsh, 2 DUIs and a fraud charge from 2019. Leo absorbed that. A criminal, living in his house, driving his truck, wearing his sweatshirt. What are my options, he asked. Craig didn't flinch. Several, but first you need to decide what you want. Leo thought about it. Not revenge, not a screaming match, just clarity, justice, consequences. I want what's mine, he said, and I want her to understand what that costs. Then here's what we do, Craig replied, laying out the next phase. The following day, Leo drove past his house for the first time in months. Oliver's truck wasn't there, but Sabrina's car was in the driveway. That he parked down the street and watched. The yard looked trimmed, the flower beds were new. She'd redecorated, trying to scrub him out of the frame. He didn't knock. That wasn't the plan. Instead, he drove to the bank and met with the loan officer who'd handled the refinance. Leo showed his military ID, showed the actual signature on his driver's license. Then the forged documents. The officer's face paled. He promised to escalate. Leo said he already had. That night, Sabrina texted him for the first time in weeks. Who have you been talking to at the bank? Oliver said someone was asking questions. Leo didn't answer. The next morning, he went to the county clerk's office, filed formal paperwork contesting the refinance, registered a fraud notice against any further changes to the property title, legally locked the house in place. 2 days later, Sabrina called. Leo let it ring. She left a voicemail. We need to talk. The bank called about the house. What are you doing? If this is about the divorce, we can discuss it like adults. Like adults. Same words as the email. He still didn't respond. Craig called that afternoon. The bank froze the refinance money, and there's more. Your truck? Yeah? Oliver was pulled over in it this morning, driving on a suspended license. They impounded it. Good, Leo said. That's not the only thing. There were prescription pads in the truck. Leo frowned. Blank? No. From the dental office Sabrina works at, and they weren't blank. Leo said nothing. They're investigating, Craig added. It could go deeper. Leo hung up and sat on the edge of his motel bed. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was criminal. Maybe it always had been. He wanted to call her, warn her, old reflexes. But then he remembered the cameras, the footage, Oliver walking his dog, his mug in someone else's hand, his life lived by strangers. He didn't call. He tightened the perimeter. The next morning, he met with a bank fraud investigator. Name was Thompson. Tired guy, coffee-stained tie, eyes that had seen too many schemes. This happens more than people think, Thompson said, laying out documents. Deployed spouse, someone sees an opportunity. What now? Leo asked. We've frozen the funds, but half of it's already gone. Leo leaned in. Where? Thompson hesitated. I'm not supposed to share that. My name was forged. My house. My loan. My money. Thompson turned the screen toward him. Transfers to a Daniel Spencer. Leo blinked. Not Oliver? No, someone else. Who the hell is Daniel Spencer? Real estate, Thompson said. That's all I know. You'll need your lawyer to subpoena more. Leo called Craig as soon as he stepped outside. Spencer? Craig repeated. Give me an hour. 50 minutes later, he called back. Got him. Daniel Spencer, real estate agent, fast sales, cash-only deals. Sabrina was probably planning to sell the house. Leo felt the weight of that settle. She used the money as earnest deposits, Craig added. And here's where it gets worse. Spencer and Oliver have worked together before. 3 sales in the last 2 years. Leo sat on a bench nearby, staring at nothing. This was planned? Hard to say. Maybe she's being used, or maybe she's part of it. Leo closed his eyes. What do we do now? He asked. I've already contacted the FBI, Craig said. This isn't just divorce. This is federal. State lines, VA fraud, military exploitation. They're very interested. That night, Leo sat in his motel room with a beer and a copy of everything Craig had found. He read it all twice. The signatures, the transactions, the agent names, the shared clients. It was a network. His phone buzzed, a text from Sabrina. Nathan, please call me. The bank is saying something about fraud. Oliver got arrested. I don't understand what's happening. He typed back, who is Daniel Spencer? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, appeared again, then nothing. I don't know what you're talking about. Leo typed, $14,600, multiple transfers, house listing, 10 minutes passed. Then, it's not what you think. Leo turned off the phone and went to sleep. He didn't need explanations. He already had the truth. The next morning, Leo got the call from Craig. The FBI wants to meet. They'd been investigating Oliver Marsh and Daniel Spencer for months. Leo's case added something their investigation had lacked, pattern and motive wrapped in federal jurisdiction. It involved VA loans, forged documents, cross-state wire transfers, and a deployed service member being exploited. That was enough to bring the full weight of the Bureau down. He met Agents Patel and Donovan at the FBI field office in Spokane. They were direct, professional. They didn't need the backstory, just the proof. Leo handed them the folder Craig had compiled, forged refinance forms, Sabrina's notarized deed changes, bank statements, home security footage, emails, text messages, all labeled, indexed, and timestamped. Agent Patel scanned the contents and nodded slowly. This helps establish conspiracy, not just isolated bad behavior. This shows organized fraud targeting military families. Leo asked the question that had been pressing in his mind since the pieces started connecting. What about Sabrina? The agents exchanged a look. Donovan answered carefully. We're still determining her level of involvement. Did she express financial stress before the refinance? Leo thought back. She mentioned we were house poor, wanted to downsize. I didn't agree. The mortgage was manageable. We weren't stretched. And the refinance? Patel asked. Never discussed it. She did it without me, forged my name. They took more notes, asked follow-ups, verified the timeline. When they were done, Patel handed him a business card. We'll be in touch. In the meantime, do not confront your wife or Oliver. Let us build this case clean. Leo nodded. He understood the rules. That evening, he drove to the neighborhood again. Parked at the same spot down the block. Oliver's truck was back in the driveway. Sabrina's car wasn't there. His phone buzzed. A text from Sabrina. We need to talk. Meet me at Riverfront Park tomorrow at 10. He showed the message to Craig the next morning over breakfast. Craig shook his head. Don't go. Nothing good comes from talking to her now. I'm not going, Leo said, but I want to know what she's doing while she thinks I'm showing up. At 9:30 a.m., they parked across the street from the house. At 9:45, Sabrina exited the house and drove off, headed downtown. At 10:05, a white SUV with a real estate logo pulled into the driveway. Craig raised an eyebrow. Daniel Spencer, Leo said. They watched as Oliver stepped out to greet him. The two men shook hands, exchanged words, and walked into the house. Craig reached for the door handle. We following? Leo shook his head. No need. He pulled out his phone. I installed interior cameras last year, uploads to the cloud. Craig smirked. You didn't mention that before. Didn't come up. Leo opened the security app and cast the feed to Craig's phone. Spencer was taking photos in the living room. Oliver pointed out features, cabinets, appliances, flooring. Leo turned up the volume. Should list by the end of the week, Spencer was saying. Got a buyer interested already. Cash offer as usual. How much? Oliver asked. We list at $470. Buyer offers $420. Everybody's happy. What about the husband? Spencer waved it off. She says he's making noise. Typical military guy. Loud at first, but they've got deployments, pensions, red tape. He'll settle to make it disappear. Leo glanced at Craig. You getting this? Craig was already recording the screen on his phone. Every word. Leo forwarded the live feed link to Agent Patel with the subject line, happening now. 29 minutes later, black SUVs lined the street. The house was surrounded. Spencer and Oliver were led out in cuffs. Leo and Craig watched from down the block. Leo's phone rang. Patel's voice came through clear. We got them. Wire fraud, conspiracy, and attempted sale of property under false pretenses. The recording's admissible. Leo asked the next question slowly. What happens to Sabrina? That depends on what she knew and on what you want. Patel hung up. Leo looked toward the house. Sabrina was just arriving. She pulled up to the chaos, stepped out, stood frozen at the curb as agents moved in and out, carrying boxes of paperwork. His old life packed in evidence bags. He watched for a long time. 13 years. Not all bad. Some of them had been good, even beautiful. But that was over. Later that week, the Bureau finalized the charges. Oliver and Spencer both took plea deals. In exchange, they provided evidence of 3 more couples they'd defrauded. A federal web began to form. Sabrina maintained that she hadn't known the full scheme, claimed Oliver convinced her Leo had been hiding money, planning to leave her broke, said the refinance was Oliver's idea. She just signed what he gave her. Craig didn't believe her. Neither did Leo. But when it came down to it, Leo didn't want her in prison. He wanted restitution. He wanted her to feel the full financial weight of her decisions. They drafted a settlement. Sabrina would forfeit all claims to the house, repay the stolen funds through liquidation of her accounts, and sign a written confession regarding the forged documents. In exchange, Leo wouldn't pursue further charges. 6 months after that first email from Kandahar, the divorce was finalized. No contest. No fault. No ceremony. The day the papers were signed, Agent Patel called. Oliver Marsh was sentenced today. 8 years. Conspiracy, fraud, identity theft. Spencer? Leo asked. 12 years. Multiple counts. But there's more. Your case broke it open. We've identified 11 other families. Leo sat quietly with the phone in his hand. They might get their money back, Patel said, because of you. She hung up. Leo didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The fight was finished. A year later, Leo sold the house. He didn't want to. Not at first. He told himself he could renovate it again, rip out every trace of Oliver and Sabrina, repaint the walls, replace the floors, reclaim what was his. But it wasn't the cabinets or carpets that haunted him. It was the memory of betrayal soaked into every corner. Too many ghosts in the drywall. Too much silence between the beams. He used the proceeds to buy a cabin outside Missoula. 2 bedrooms, 10 acres. A narrow creek in the back. No neighbors for miles, just space and quiet. He took early retirement from the Army. 20 years was enough. He'd earned the right to walk away. His pension was steady, and the money Sabrina hadn't stolen filled the rest. He adopted a German shepherd named Scout, spent most days doing carpentry for locals, fixing porches, building sheds, repairing things other people forgot to maintain. It didn't pay much, but it kept his hands busy. And it kept his mind clear. Some days he thought about her, not with anger, not even sorrow, just curiosity. Craig heard from a contact that Sabrina had moved back to her hometown in Oregon, started working at another dental office, living in a modest apartment, starting over. Leo never reached out. She never tried again either. That part was finished. Then one day, a letter arrived. Not email, not a text, a handwritten letter with a Texas return address. The envelope had the familiar tone of something that mattered. Inside was a note from a woman in Fort Worth. Her husband was Navy, deployed 6 months out of the year. She wrote that her family had nearly been pulled into a scheme, that someone named Oliver had approached her while her husband was overseas, pitching a refinance deal. Promised a better rate, quicker payments, a smarter investment. It sounded too good. She hesitated. Then she heard from the FBI. They warned her just in time. The letter said she had asked the agent how the Bureau even knew to contact her. They told her Leo Briggs had helped bring the operation down. "You don't know me," the letter read, "but you saved our home. You fought back when it would have been easier to walk away. I just wanted to say thank you." Leo read the letter twice. Then he pinned it to the refrigerator with an old magnet shaped like a paratrooper's boot. Some days, the quiet in the cabin felt too loud. Other days, it felt like peace. He took Scout for long walks. Sometimes they crossed the creek and disappeared into the woods for hours. There was no schedule, no formation, no watch rotation. Just trees and time. Every now and then, he'd hear from Craig. The last update had come a few months earlier. Spencer had tried to appeal his sentence. It was denied. Oliver had picked up a job in prison as a janitor. The system, for once, had worked. One evening in late fall, Leo opened his inbox and saw a message from Sabrina. Just one line. "I never meant for things to end this way." He stared at it for a minute, then deleted it. There was nothing left to say. He spent that winter cutting firewood, watching old war films, fixing up his truck, and ignoring the phone. Spring came. Then summer. One morning, while installing a deck for a retired couple who lived an hour north, the man asked if Leo had served. Leo nodded. Didn't elaborate. "Thank you," the man said simply. Leo didn't answer. He just went back to work. Sometimes gratitude didn't need to be spoken. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person could do was keep building something new, even after everything they'd built had burned. Later that evening, Leo pulled into his gravel driveway, let Scout out the passenger door, and walked into the cabin. The letter was still on the fridge, still hanging there with that old magnet. He read it again. It didn't heal everything, but it reminded him why he'd fought, why he'd stayed quiet, stayed sharp, stayed patient. Not for revenge, not even for closure, for the truth. And the truth had mattered. It had stopped a man from stealing another life. It had kept a roof over a child's head. It had ended a pattern that had gone unchecked for too long. Leo wasn't a hero. He never believed in that word. He was a soldier, a husband, a man who lost everything, then decided that losing wasn't the final chapter. The world hadn't made space for him, so he carved it out for himself. Not perfect, not pretty, but finally, undeniably his. 6 months after settling into the cabin, Leo received a package from the FBI, a thick envelope with his name typed neatly across the front. Inside were case summaries, transcripts, court outcomes. A letter from Agent Patel included a handwritten note. "We thought you'd want to see how far it reached." 11 families. That was the final count. 11 military households, Army, Navy, Marines, targeted while one spouse was deployed. Every case involved a refinance scam, forged documents, and a quick sale to buyers connected to Daniel Spencer. Oliver had been the common thread. He slipped into lives like a shadow, playing the part of rescuer, then stealing everything that wasn't nailed down. The timeline stretched back 4 years. Leo flipped through the files slowly, page by page. Names he didn't recognize, photographs of people who'd probably never heard of him, but they shared the same silence he had, the same shock, the same violation. According to the Bureau's report, Spencer had received kickbacks from every transaction. Small percentages disguised as closing costs, routing fees, service charges. But when multiplied across multiple deals, it added up. He'd pulled in over $500,000. Oliver had acted as the middleman, seducing the wives, sowing distrust, feeding lies. Once the refinance went through, he'd move on, leaving the women to face the fallout: foreclosure, divorce, ruined credit, broken families. Sabrina wasn't the first. She probably wouldn't have been the last. But Leo had interrupted the chain. After reading everything, he called Craig. "They sent me the whole web," he said. "It's worse than we thought." "It usually is," Craig replied. "But they stopped it. You stopped it." That evening, Leo sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee, watching the treetops sway. He thought about the first withdrawal he'd seen on his banking app, that moment in the mess hall when something inside him shifted. He'd trusted his instincts then, and they'd been right. Craig called again a few days later. There was a new development. "Remember the woman in Fort Worth?" he asked. Leo did. The one who sent the letter. Her husband filed a civil suit. Turns out they weren't the only ones who'd held back. A group of them is banding together. Class action. They want you to join. Leo paused. "Not sure I want back in. I get it, but they're naming Spencer, Oliver, and some of the cash buyers who knew more than they claimed. You've got standing." Leo didn't answer right away. Not because he doubted his role, but because he wasn't sure he wanted to reopen the file. He told Craig he'd think about it. That night, he pulled out the folder from the FBI again, flipped to the last page. There was a note from Agent Donovan. "In the end, what helped build the case wasn't the money trail. It was the pattern. And your story gave us the blueprint." Leo closed the folder. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about punishment. It was about impact. He called Craig back the next morning. "Add me to the list." A few weeks later, he was deposed over Zoom, sworn in, asked to recount the timeline, the discoveries, the fallout. He answered every question plainly. No embellishment, just the truth. The case went public. News outlets picked it up. Military Times ran a piece. So did a few local stations. Some veterans reached out. A few former neighbors. Some hadn't known anything had happened. Others had heard rumors. Leo didn't reply to most of them. He didn't need the attention. He wasn't looking for applause. But when one of the reporters asked for a statement, he sent a single line. "Protect your people, no matter how far away you are." By autumn, the lawsuit reached mediation. Spencer's assets were frozen. Oliver's were already gone, tied up in restitution from the criminal trial. The buyers who'd knowingly participated settled quickly, hoping to avoid more exposure. Each family received a share. It wasn't everything they'd lost, but it was enough to make a dent. Leo donated half his share to a fund Craig helped set up for legal assistance to military spouses facing fraud. The rest he used to expand the cabin's workshop, bought better tools, hired a local kid part-time, showed him how to square lumber, how to measure twice, how to keep your head down and your words solid. One night, sitting by the wood stove with Scout at his feet, Leo opened a letter from a couple in San Diego. They'd been in the lawsuit, too. A young Marine and his wife. They thanked him for holding the line when no one else had. For showing that silence isn't always surrender. Leo folded the letter and tucked it behind the one from Fort Worth. He didn't need a wall of trophies. Just a few reminders that not everything was wasted. Sometimes the damage clears the ground for something new. Sometimes the wreckage leaves space for better things. He went to bed that night with the windows open, listening to the sound of wind through the trees. And for the first time in years, the sound didn't remind him of what he'd lost. It reminded him of everything still ahead. The following spring, Leo built a fence around the edge of the property. It wasn't to keep anyone out. No one ever came this far unless they meant to. It was more about marking the boundary. This is where my life starts now. He dug the posts by hand, set them in concrete, ran cedar boards along the lines. It was slow work. He liked it that way. Scout followed him from post to post, always a step behind. The mornings were cool, the air sharp, every sound carried. Hammer against wood, saw through grain. The rhythm made sense in a way people hadn't for a long time. Craig visited once in early May. He brought beer and updates. The lawsuit had been finalized. Everyone had received their disbursement. There were rumors of more investigations in other states. Different names, different tactics, but the same exploitation under a different banner. "Your case lit a fire," Craig said. "You gave them the structure they needed." Leo didn't say much, just nodded. Later that afternoon, as Craig got ready to leave, he looked around the property, the half-built deck, the new fence. "You ever think about starting over with someone new?" he asked. Leo shrugged. "I don't think about before or after much, just what's in front of me." Craig left with a pat on the truck hood and a promise to call. Summer came. Leo worked more, drove less. Locals started calling him for jobs, porch repairs, new stairs, once even a custom dining table. He never advertised, never posted flyers. Word spread the way it does in small towns. Quiet, steady, personal. In August, he got a letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs. They'd reviewed the fraud linked to his VA loan. Because of the circumstances, the mortgage would be restructured, the record cleared. The property history would note the forgery, absolving him of responsibility for the illegal refinance. It didn't change what happened, but it changed the paper trail. And in legal systems, that mattered. That night, Leo sat on the front steps, the sound of insects humming in the trees, the last bit of sun dipping behind the ridge. He thought about the weight of names on documents, about how easy it was to disappear under someone else's handwriting. His name had been used, his identity twisted. But here he was, undiminished. That September, a local high school asked if he'd come speak to a senior class about service. They were doing a unit on civic duty, and someone's uncle had mentioned Leo was a veteran. He said no the first time, then changed his mind. When he stood in front of the classroom, he didn't wear his uniform. He didn't bring medals or talk about deployments. He told them about trust, about risk, about what happens when someone sees your absence as opportunity. He didn't name names, didn't describe courtrooms or agents or betrayals. He said, "You don't always get to pick what happens to you, but you always get to choose what you'll do with it." A few students asked questions after. One of them, tall kid, buzz cut, probably heading to basic training soon, asked if Leo regretted staying quiet at the beginning, not confronting his ex sooner. Leo thought for a moment, then said, "You don't win by being the loudest. You win by being the last one standing with the truth in your hand." The kid nodded like he understood. The following week, Leo found a small package in his mailbox, no return address. Inside was a wooden plaque, hand-carved. On it, the words, "You didn't have to fight, but you did anyway." He didn't know who sent it. Maybe someone from the class. Maybe one of the families. He hung it in the workshop, right above the door. By late October, the leaves turned and the nights dropped into the 30s. Scout's coat thickened. Leo added a second woodpile behind the cabin. One afternoon, while splitting logs, his phone buzzed with a name he hadn't seen in over a year. Sabrina. He let it ring, watched it go to voicemail. Later, out of some instinct he didn't quite understand, he listened. Her voice was different, quieter. She said she'd heard about the lawsuit, heard about the speaking event, said she was glad he was okay. Then she paused. "I was weak," she said. "That's not an excuse, just the truth. I let someone else tell me what to believe, and I didn't question it until it was too late. I know I don't deserve anything from you. I needed to say that out loud." There was no request for forgiveness, no ask, just the sound of her acknowledging the wreckage. Leo deleted the message, not out of anger, because he didn't need it anymore. That night, he sat at the workbench, running a cloth over a nearly finished rocking chair he'd been building for a couple expecting their first child. The joints were tight. The grain was clean. It rocked just right. He thought about the families whose lives had been salvaged, the ones who'd lost less because he'd decided not to stay quiet. He didn't want credit. He just wanted to know that when things broke, someone did something. The truth, Leo had learned, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the slowest moving thing in the room. Sometimes it waits. But when it shows up, it rearranges everything. And if you're lucky, if you're ready, it gives you the chance to rebuild with something better than you had before. Something honest, something that lasts. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's story. Your presence here means more than words can express. Through this story, we're reminded that no matter how deep the betrayal, how unexpected the storm, or how hard the fall, it's always possible to rebuild, stronger, wiser, and on your own terms. The power of truth, quiet resilience, and patience can bring light into the darkest corners. If you found value in this story, the best way to support our channel is simple. Give us a like, leave a comment below to let us know which country you're watching from and what thoughts or feelings the story stirred in you. We love hearing your voices from all over the world. It's what keeps this space alive and meaningful. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any future stories. Every click, every comment, and every moment you spend with us helps keep these stories going. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you again for being here. We're grateful to be on this journey with you.